Sorry for the delay. Just trying to get things set up. Taking a little longer than expected. All right. Sorry for the delay. Taking a little longer than expected. Interesting. All right. Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Good morning.
Today, boy, I've got to really figure out why these slides are looking funky. This one looks okay, but the next one is all strange. I'll have to fix these. Today we're doing lesson 10 on our series of living a more intentional life. It's about work today. Last week we talked about spiritual preparation, gave some things to do to make sure that you're staying prepared. And as always, the theme is to pick a plan, go execute it, figure out what it is that you need to improve on or change about what you're doing, and go do it. So we're right over here on the work topic. We've only got a few. Oh my, that did not work. Right over here on the work topic. Next week will be gratitude, and then we've only got a few left before the entire series of classes is over. Perhaps like we did the first couple, we'll be able to do the last couple in person, but I don't know. We'll go with the flow. So work. First thing I kind of want to start off with is and then maybe this has come out as a silly question, but is work a good thing or a bad thing?
Yes.
Yes, and yes.
Why do you say that? It made us all chuckle, so there's some truth in it.
Well, it's a good thing because people should be occupied with something, have a purpose. Work serves that need. Other things obviously can as well, but work is a pretty common thing that meets that need.
And it supports us.
And it supports you, supports your living. But it can be a bad thing because sometimes work environments have a lot of things that are outside of your control, and it can have a way of taking over your life in a not good way.
Yeah.
There's a scripture that says, if a man shall not work, he shall not eat.
Yeah, we'll get to a bunch of those for sure. It's kind of it's one of those, it's a 4-letter word, so it kind of comes with that connotation. Sometimes it's a good thing, sometimes it's a bad thing, sometimes you like it, sometimes not. Open your Bibles, if you will, to Genesis in 2:15. I put it up on the screen too. I think I've got all the verses on the screen today too. So the Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and keep it, right? So to some degree, God created us to work, right? He put us to work right away. That was one of the first purposes, right? And not just us, right? In Mark chapter 6, we know Jesus was regarded as a carpenter. He went away from there and came to his hometown, and his disciples followed him, and on the Sabbath began to teach in the synagogue. And many who heard him were astonished, saying, "Where did this man get these things? What is this wisdom given to him? How are such mighty works done by his hands? Is not this the carpenter, the son of Mary and brother of James and Joseph and Judas and Simon are not his sisters here with us?" And they took offense at him. And Jesus said to them, "A prophet is not without honor except in his own town and among his relatives and in his own household." He could do no mighty work there except that he laid his hands on a few sick people and healed them. And he marveled because of their unbelief. So, it doesn't, I don't think we have a whole lot of evidence of Jesus having the profession other than people knew him as the carpenter, but I have a hard time thinking that they knew him as the carpenter if he hadn't done it, right? The next slide is all messed up too. I must have picked the wrong slide to copy and paste. I may get to start over on this template next week. So how do we want to approach this? So Jesus works, we've been made to work. Does God work? That's horrible. I don't.
Well, Jesus says he must be about the work that his Father sent him to do.
Okay.
So he was here to work.
He was here to work. Sure. How is our work different than God's work or from the work that Jesus did? Or is there a difference between the three?
I think that when Jesus worked, it was to show God's power and, to teach who God was or is. But also when we work, it's part of that as far as like we need to express our Christianity to others and share our faith and belief and what God teaches in the Bible, but it's also to strengthen our own faith at the same time. I think when we do God's work, it benefits us as much as it benefits others.
For Jesus, it was always like Father, like Son. John 5:17. My Father is always at his work, and I am too.
Well, even 12-year-old Jesus says, don't you know I should be about my Father's business?
Mm-hmm.
So he started at 12.
I wish Ethan was working. All right. I'll have to remember that. That'll be a good one for the next time Mr. Lazy Bones rolls around. So God works, Jesus works. Everything God has made, he's done for our benefit and for good. So why then the hesitation about work being a good thing?
I think because a lot of times the work that we get involved in is not something that we enjoy doing. We do it because we have to earn a living.
You know? I think that's absolutely true. What else?
Well, also in light of most of the population being in lockdown, people are just clamoring actually to get back to a job, even that previously they didn't like. They just want to be able to make a living, support and feed their families.
No, I don't want to be in it.
Jesus had been worn out by the constant traffic of people coming to him. And he could have spent his entire 33 and a half years of life just healing people. But that wasn't his main purpose. That wasn't the work that he was sent to do.
Well, I guess pressing the space bar is going to push it right there. It's by sin, I think. When you reach back to Genesis and And to Adam, he said, because you have listened to the voice of your wife and you've eaten of the tree of which I commanded you, you shall not eat it. Cursed is the ground because of you, and pain you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Our work was made difficult, right? What it is that we're supposed to do, which, our job was to tend the garden, was made difficult because of sin. So there's this relationship that I think between the work we're supposed to do and the difficulty of that work, and sin kind of getting in the way between all of these kinds of different things. So I want to spend a little time and maybe explore that. And at the end, I'm interested to see if you buy it or if I'm off base. So how then are we tempted with regard to work? What does that look like? How do we fall short in our work?
With the difference between secular and sacred things, where at work, a lot of times we tend to go along with worldly things and ideas rather than focusing on, what the long-term goal is to be.
Yeah. What else? How do we fall short at work?
Giving unto God what is God's, and unto Caesar what is Caesar's.
What do you mean by that?
Well, there are things in our life and being the people that God wants us to be, and then there's work. And so, even though we should still be the people God wants us to be at work, some people make work their life, their whole life.
Yeah.
Well, also sometimes people don't like the work they're doing, or they just don't want to work, so they are slackers or lazy type at it. Where instead of putting their whole effort into work, they half-heart it. But God wants us to put everything we have into it. If we work for Him, or even if we're working for somebody else, we do a job that we're supposed to do.
Right. Absolutely. I think it looks a lot like unintentional work, right? We talked about things that are intentional and things that are unintentional. And what does it look like when we don't have a plan for how work fits in our lives, how work fits within our walk with God? Right? If we don't set those pieces up and figure out how we want all those pieces to work, then we're just show up, turn the crank, come home, eat dinner, right? Rinse and repeat. And kind of reaching back to a lot of what we talked about early on, right? A lot of times when we have unintentional things going on in our lives, it's for lack of purpose, right? And if your purpose at work is to pay the day's bills, and that's kind of it, I wonder if sometimes we've missed it.
Or sometimes, I suppose, people use work as a means to avoid things at home or things outside of work.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think we also have to be careful about having our light shine at work. Sometimes we're not in environments that are conducive to that. And so we are not living as God would have us live on a 24/7 basis.
Yeah, sometimes at work it feels like it's in a bubble, right? And it's unrelated to the rest of your life, however it is you tend to work, to live it. you know, because I think a lot of times we work with a different set of people, right? My work crew does not overlap with my personal or my church crew at all, right? There's very, very little in common except for an occasional hello passing in the halls if a couple of my fellow Northrop Grumman folks happen to be in the same building. But otherwise, they're completely disconnected. So I put a couple things down. I think we've already talked about all of these. Worshiping work, right? Putting work first above everything else. Rejecting work. We didn't talk about the next one. Taking shortcuts, right? The ends justify the means. Doesn't really matter how we got there. Turning in work that's not complete. Making a deal on the side because it's in your best interest, but maybe not necessarily in the best interest of what you're trying to accomplish at work, right? Those are kind of things that I think can slip in there too. And I think that comes when you kind of disconnect your purpose in life from your purpose in work, right?
Colossians 3:23. Do all your work as for the Lord, not as for men. Do it heartily, but as for the Lord. And we need to keep that foremost in our minds, regardless of the work we are doing, whether it's paying money for getting money for bills to pay or working in the garden. You know, it is to serve the Lord. So
I love that, and in 2 or 3 clicks, I'll send a virtual dollar your way. So what are the characteristics then of intentional work? What does it look like when you flip that switch to work with intent, right? And we're not going to spend too much time. I don't think we're going to spend too much time on why we work. I think I've got a couple token verses in for, as was mentioned previously, right? If they don't work, they don't eat. Okay. So we're going to work, and I'm taking that as an assumed. So what does it look like when you work intentionally?
You hold yourself accountable to the results that you want to end up with.
Yeah, why? Yeah, why?
Because someone else is holding you accountable. In other words, you work because you've shown that you can produce results, and you want to keep producing those results. So you want to, build faith in the people that hired you. Absolutely.
And I think there's a next step there, because it's, I believe we need to tie our work back to our purpose here on earth.
I think this speaks to integrity and character.
Absolutely. And why is it important that our coworkers see us with character and integrity?
Because then our light shines from God.
Yeah, we're dual citizens, right? We're citizens of the earth and we're citizens of God's kingdom. And we need to be showing God's kingdom in the way that He wants it to be shown. And part of that is, being honest and trustworthy and true and hardworking and all of those pieces, right? And when you deliver your work and you do what you say you're going to do, it reflects well on you and the citizenship you represent, right? And that's a way of representing God at work. Right?
It's like Hebrew National Hot Dogs commercial. We answer to a higher power.
Absolutely. I love it.
You know, I feel like the best, that we're going to do the best at work when we hold ourselves to a higher standard, not when we're working because there's someone who is wanting us to produce results, but when we want to do our best, when it's important to us to do a good job. And I think that because if your motivation is to please your boss, and your boss, you get angry with your boss, or your boss is unreasonable, that's when you're more likely to do the minimum, to do just what you have to do to please your boss and nothing more.
Right. So I think I saw it phrased an interesting way in preparing for this class, and it's to remember that Jesus is your boss, right?
Right.
Whatever you do, work heartily is for the Lord and not for men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the inheritance as your reward. You are serving the Lord Christ, right? So thanks again for the pre-read on the verse. So, you know, if Jesus is your boss, right, how does that change your perspective at work? What do you do differently because Jesus is your boss at work?
Well, for one thing, we love our boss. When we love our boss, we want to please them. It's so different from, you know, if you think about the different kinds of bosses that you've had in your lifetime at work, and how easy some are to please, how they lead by example, and they encourage you to do well, and they're understanding when you make a mistake, versus the kind of boss that's a micromanager that you can never please, no matter how hard you try. And Jesus is the kind that encourages you and leads by example, and forgives you when you fall short. And boy, that's the kind of boss I want all the time. Didn't have that very often in my work life.
Yeah, he sets an incredibly high bar too.
Yes.
Right, impossibly high. I kind of, when I read this struck something funny in my head. It's a little bit different, and so I when I look at my work and what I'm supposed to do, I've got a whole series of annual objectives. Right, these are the things I've got to do each year. Right, but if Jesus is my boss, how many of those are his? Right? What do I need to be putting on there? Or how do I need to make sure that I'm working towards those with the acknowledgement that he's the one ultimately in charge, and all of those things need to be run through him too? Or are there things that need to be on there because Jesus is my boss? And it struck me a different way. So my apologies if that's a bit silly. My noggin doesn't always work the same way.
I think it also shows that not only do you worry about him being above you, but it also teaches you how to treat the people around you, and perhaps the people below you in the chain of command at work, and how you should treat them. And so what kind of boss Jesus is the kind of boss or coworker you should be.
Well, I think there's also integrity, that if Jesus is our boss and we work as if Jesus is our boss, people can trust our integrity.
That's Margaret, that sparked an interesting thought in my head. You know, what if we talked, Gordon talked last week about the what would Jesus do bracelets and all those kinds of things. What if Jesus really was your coworker? What if you worked in his carpentry shop? Right? What do you? All right. Another piece, and we talked about this, right, is to not get discouraged, right? And knowing that God's working through your work. You're there and working, and it's not, again, your time and your effort is not just to turn the crank and earn the dollar, right? But God's working through you, even if you aren't sure that he is. So don't get discouraged, right? There's a reason and a purpose where you are and why you're there. And sometimes it's hard to kind of see, right? I tend to take a lot of different jobs with the company I'm in. I bounce around an awful lot. I see a lot of different things. And sometimes I go somewhere and it's just like, how did I wind up in this alley, right? Or this dead end. And I was that way for a couple years, just kind of bouncing between activities. And I really, no sense of purpose in terms of what I was doing, but it seemed like the right thing to do. And I was learning all kinds of really ridiculous skills that I didn't think were very useful.
John,
And I just one moment. Recently, though, when we got kicked off of base, we were working out at base. We needed to come back and do a whole bunch of really strange things really fast. Well, it turns out all those strange things are the things I spent the last 2 years practicing on my dead end. Right, so that dead end job put me in a spot where I was able to, work hard, represent well, and achieve things for the company. But ultimately, Jesus is my boss, right? So we were able to achieve things for him in terms of making sure that all those things work together, right? So when you're kind of stuck in the eddy waters, right? Don't get discouraged, right? God is working with you and through you, and there's good things to come. Gordon?
I was just going to say, I think I mentioned it to you when we were in the church building during the early lessons. Why do you spend money for that which is not bread? This is Isaiah 55, verse 2. So why do you spend money for that which is not bread? And now this one, and your labor for that which does not satisfy. The idea being is that if our job is not satisfying, is it because we have signed up for something that was not in the brief, or is it my attitude towards the particular job that we are in that doesn't give us or me satisfaction?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Hey, John, quick comment on that. What makes us happy at work? So, if we're dissatisfied with what we're doing, what could help us to become happy about what we're doing?
Attitude.
All right, so your attitude has a lot to do with it, but I think the biggest part of it is being servants, right? And I think that's one of the things that we have to realize when we're working is we're servants and we're doing a job. Even if we're, at the top of the ladder and we're the boss, we're still servants, and we have to serve others. And if you think about it in the church, Jesus was happy to be a servant, and he served others and gave others everything he had. And I think sometimes we get selfish at work where we're not serving others, but we're trying to serve ourselves. And I think that's what kind of causes us to be unhappy in our work, is because we're just trying to serve ourselves and we're not getting what we want. And we're always expecting the next thing. We want more, instead of just being happy serving others.
Even Jesus removed himself from the crowds to recharge.
Right.
Yeah. Absolutely.
What I found through my working career is that if I focused on doing what was needed for the job and doing it well, being honest, having that integrity, and accomplishing the goals through proper means, not taking those shortcuts, that any rewards that would be coming came. I did not undertake any particular job or project with the idea that I would get this or that recognition or a particular promotion or things like that. Do the work, and the good things will do the work properly and do it well according to your company's guidelines and all, assuming you're working for an honest company. Then the rewards and things like that will follow. And if they come, great. If they don't, you know you've done your best and done it the way that you can live with, and that should be good enough.
Excellent. There's another topic I don't think we've quite touched on, so we'll send a moment on it. But do it without stress, right? Trust God with your work. 1 Peter chapter 5, humble yourselves therefore under the mighty hand of God, so that at the proper time he may exalt you, casting all your anxieties on him, because he cares for you, right? That stress piece is unnecessary, right? God's going to make sure that things work for you in the best way. And that may mean, sometimes that may mean you don't get the project done on time, or that things don't necessarily work out. That doesn't mean don't work hard, right? You work hard, you make things work, but realize that at the end of it, it doesn't change your destination, right? God's got you. What else? Anything else?
You realize, of course, that working without stress is a thing to overcome, and very few of us do that.
Yeah, work was made hard, right? Work was made hard. And it's not easy, right? And it takes an awful lot of work and effort and practice to let that stress leave, particularly when you're in a spot when a company or an activity you're doing is downsizing, right? There's an awful lot of lives and livelihoods at stake, kind of in and around you, where, regardless of where you work in that circumstance, there's a lot of stress that can be inflicted there. And certainly there's a lot of stress right now for folks who are, working or not working, or being asked to go to work but feel unsafe doing so. There's a lot of stress there. Our opportunities for stress, stressors, and making sure that you take care of those is important.
I think this is where we have to cast all our cares on him.
Yep.
We're not in control. God is sovereign.
Yep, absolutely. Difficult to do, but as much a spiritual practice as it is a secular practice, if you will, right? Intentional work, I think, and this has already been mentioned, I think, Roger, you mentioned this. When you're at work, dedicate yourself to it, right? Make sure that while you're there, you're doing everything you can to complete what you're working at. My preview has gone away. There we go. Proverbs 6, go to the ant, O sluggard, consider her ways and be wise. Without having any chief officer or ruler, she prepares her bread in summer and gathers her food in harvest. How long will you lie there, O sluggard? When will you arise from your sleep? A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding the hands to rest, and poverty will come upon you like a robber, and want like an armed man, right? So make sure that when you're there, it's hard work. Don't let the distractions creep in and destroy you. Proverbs 12, whoever works his land will have plenty of bread, but he who follows worthless pursuits lacks sense, right? It's hard, it's difficult, it's not fun, but it's also, on the other hand, when you're there, make sure you're doing the work. And I think this was, this is something that as we've moved to an awful lot of knowledge workers and things of that nature, where you can really, you can really miss out on this. You can show up to work and do absolutely nothing, right? And it's a big deal. Our company spends a lot of time looking at engagement, which is just how dedicated to the work are the people, and they do a lot. They spend a lot of money to try and get the workforce more engaged, because this piece right here, right? This engagement and this act of hard work is, let's see, the statistics that exist in the community are that an unengaged worker produces 10% of what a fully engaged worker would. That's an order of magnitude increase by having folks turning the crank, working hard for the goals, right? So it's a massive dial from an overall work perspective, but it's those things matter, right? Even in jobs that seem to have less, I think this also talks to, from an ant perspective, there are some jobs that have less direct tasking of a series of things to go and do, right? But there's still opportunity, there's still opportunity to work hard when there's nothing on your plate, right? When there's nobody giving you the list of 1,000 things to do, and you have to make sure that you're doing those pieces too.
John, this is showing up with 100% capacity. And if Jesus is your boss, I dare say we would do that daily.
Yeah.
I think one of the important things that a business needs to do to engage their workers is to somehow show each individual, no matter how menial their job may be with the company, the importance of the tasks that they're doing. It's easy for someone who's got an important job to feel that their job is meaningful and important. But if you're a laborer, a custodial worker, it's easy to see how someone could think that their work is menial and doesn't matter.
Absolutely. And I think the other piece, with that is that our hard work is for God, right?
Right.
Even if you can't find a bigger purpose within your organization for work, you have a much bigger purpose outside of that, and that's to work hard, right? God expects it. He's told us that's part of the deal. So how then do we flip the switch, right? So we talked about what intentional work looks like. What things can we do to be more intentional at work? I think for interest of time, we're just going to go ahead and cruise through. Remember, your hard work is reflective of your character and faith. Work hard. Be present. Don't let distractions rule. Get them away. Phones at meetings is something that in my line of work is had crept in. Right, I had crept in with. I'd bring my phone to the meeting and I'd be checking email and from time to time Facebook or text messages or whatever, waiting for a meeting to start. And sometimes during the meeting, don't let those happen. Right, get them out. Provide value. Right, work, do the work, hard work, and then for those that remember, don't forget the lesson of the yellow M&M. And I think we had a pretty light crowd when I gave this lesson at the start, so we'll do it again, right? So the lesson of the yellow M&M is that you go to the store today and buy a bag of peanut M&Ms, right? You open the bag and pour them all out and pick up a yellow M&M. Walk outside on this beautiful sunny day, which I hope to enjoy more of later. And you can hold that yellow M&M up and get it just right next to the sun. And you can get it to just the right spot where the M&M blots out the sun. And for a moment, it appears as though the M&M and the sun are the same. Don't mistake a piece of candy for the power of the sun at the center of our solar system. Don't mistake the importance of work compared to God and your family. Don't forget the lesson of the yellow M&M. Go work hard. Remember, it's not nearly as important as the other pieces. Don't mistake the M&M for the sun.
John, you were talking about the importance of the family, and I've heard a saying that said, there's never been a tombstone that said, I wished I'd have spent more time at the office.
That's right. It's absolutely right. And if you think that magically by spending that extra hour at work, you're somehow going to clear the plate, you're wrong. There is always work left to be done. There is always something to do. Can always.
I remember when I was working at the Pentagon, whenever you'd leave, everybody would be looking at their watches.
Yep.
And most of what you're suggesting is an internal attitude change. These are not physical time management issues. These are internal attitude changes that, unless you are in a right relationship with the Lord and letting Him lead, regardless of the items on the screen and the bullet points, it will not happen.
Absolutely.
You have to let God lead.
Absolutely. And you can invest in all of the fancy, time planning, time management stuff in the world. But if you're not going to work hard and put first things first, you're still going to wind up in a bad spot. So go eat your bread with joy and drink your wine with a merry heart, for God has already provided what you do. Let your garments be always white. Let not oil be lacking on your head. Enjoy life with the wife whom you love all the days of your vain life that He has given you under the sun, because that is your portion in life, and in your toil at which you toil under the sun. Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with your might. For there is no work or thought or knowledge or wisdom in Sheol, to which you are going. Want to make a change? Go do it. There are things that we can do to improve what we do at work, to reflect God better in our work life, to our work community, and live more intentionally in what it is that we do for work. So if there's something in there, go pick something specific to do. Lay out a plan to do more of it, and do it. Just do it. Just do it. All right. Next week, gratitude. Gratitude. That'll be a fun one, I think. Thank you all, as usual, very much for your comments. For those of you, let's see, Kevin and Roger and Mike, as usual, pre-worship coordination meeting. We'll kick that off in just a minute. And appreciate it, you all very much. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John.
Thank you. Good.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John.
Do you want to just sit over here? And would you be walk up?
Probably, I can hear it already.
Anita.
Hi.
Miss
Anita.
Miss Jerry says hi.
Oh, how you doing? I see her. What's Tony? Oh, he's here. He's online.
I forgot to call you guys Wednesday. I'm sorry. I was gonna call you, Anita, and see how Tony was doing after his procedure on Tuesday.
Oh, yeah, he's doing good. He's doing good.
Good.
Yeah.
Hi, Jerry.
Let's go.
Good morning, Teresa and Jerry.
Morning, Dorothy.
How are you guys
Hey.
doing?
Morning. Hey, Dorothy. We've been keeping your niece in our prayers.
Thank you so much. This has just been a shock. And I'm really close. I'm, out of all my nieces and nephews, I'm closest with my brother and his wife's girls, and that's who this is. Rihanna is one of the older ones, so it's hit hard.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Hey, Bob.
Thank you for your prayers. Good morning, Miss Donna.
Good morning. How are you?
Doing great.
Yeah.
Happy Mother's Day to everyone.